Hi, I'm Liz Larson.
And I'm Bill McKenna. We're the hosts of the New Life Perspectives radio show.
We're also the creators of the Cognomovement system, where we help you rewire your nervous system so you can rewire your reality.
Join us each week for great conversations, amazing guests, and cutting-edge information on health, consciousness, and the keys to transformation.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I'm Liz Larson and Bill McKenna's with us today. Hey Bill McKenna.
Hi.
Hey, and we're going to dig right in because we have a really special guest, a new friend, Chris Anatra, if I'm going to say it in my Italian, the quantum businessman. And he's also an integral part of the International and Mandela Effect Conference team, which is really important. We're going to share a little bit more of that today. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be talking to you and Bill, and we're going to, I'm sure, talk about some very interesting, far-out subjects, but I'm sure everyone, at the very least, is going to be very entertained by what we have to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, stay with us to the end, guys. This is going to be a wild ride and really, really fun. So the topic is about the Mandela effect. So let's ask you this first. How in the world, as a businessman, did you get involved with the Mandela effect? And what is it?
Well, it started with avocados. So a lot of people remember, because the type of business that I'm in, I own a software company, and we're specialized in food distribution. So all my clients, all they do is just deal with getting food to restaurants and grocery stores, et cetera. So there were some really weird things that were happening related to the names of products. So I mentioned avocados because there's a certain type of avocado that starts with an H, right? So Liz, you know what type of avocado I'm talking about?
Haas avocados.
Yeah, exactly. The famous Haas avocados. Always spelled H-A-A-S. It has that unique German spelling. And then there was one point where it changed to Hass, H-A-S-S avocados. And that was really confusing to me because, I would buy avocados and I'd always see the spelling. And then you wonder what happened with that? And then to add to the whole craziness of all this, products were getting weird. For example, here in the States, there's this product called Stouffer Stovetop stuffing. So have you guys heard of Stouffer Stovetop stuffing?
Used it. We used it. That was a staple, at any Saturday, Sunday dinner. Stouffer Stovetop stuffing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think there was a jingle. In the back of my mind, I can hear a jingle.
Yeah, exactly. They had all these commercials about if it's not Thanksgiving, if it's not Stouffer's or Stovetop, however they would put it. Yeah, they would have all those types of things.
Yeah.
As it turns out, there's no such thing in this timeline. Stouffer Stovetop stuffing has never existed. It's always been Kraft Stovetop stuffing. And so these type of things were confusing my customers because they thought my software was changing the names in the software to making it go from Haas to Haas, or change the name of their Stouffer's product to a Kraft product. And they were saying, what's going on with your software? You've got some bugs. And I'm thinking, those are pretty weird bugs to have. But what happened was I determined that these were all examples of this Mandela effect, where we remember something a certain way, but it's never been that way. But it's not just an individual. It's literally millions of people remember Haas avocados or Stouffer Stovetop stuffing. So it's that type of thing, and related to my business, that got me interested in this. But then I had an even bigger situation that happened where there was this big Mandela effect for me related to the JFK assassination. And this happened at the end of 2016. And I always remember, because I'd watched the videos as a kid and stuff, trying to figure out who was involved. Was it the CIA? Was it this? Who was involved in all that? And then come to find out, I watched this video at the end of 2016, and it's a different video. Like there's more people in the car, there's this and that. But yeah, so that's a big example of another Mandela effect for people about how that particular historical element has changed. It's not at all the way I remember it. So I don't know, Liz or Bill, like if you can go back in your mind, if you've ever seen that video, like I would ask, do you remember how many people were in the car? Like as an example, if you were to reach
I
back
thought there
into
was
your...
3. What do you think, Bill?
Okay, here's what I remember. I remember the driver. There was a driver. I remember John F. Kennedy was in the back. His wife was next to him. And there might have been one other person, but I'm not sure. There might have been a third person in the back. And that's what I recall.
Okay. What about you, Liz?
I remember there were 3, and I'm not a big buff on JFK, but I thought there was a driver and the 2 people sitting in the back. Like that's what the video playing in my mind looks like, which almost makes sense to me that there would just be the 2 people and a driver, but that's what I recall.
Yeah, that's really interesting because my earliest memories are with 3 people in the car. And I remember the film being actually black and white.
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
later on, it changed for me so that there were 4 people in the car. And this is like when I was in like my 30s, like I didn't pay that much attention to it. And like maybe I missed the other person. But when I watched it in 2016, there's now 6 people in the car. And JFK isn't the only one that gets shot. In front of him, in this weird like jump seat thing in front of him, is the governor of Texas and his wife. So now there's actually 6 people in the car. There's the driver, the Secret Service agent to his right, governor of Texas and his wife, and JFK and Jackie in the back. And the governor of Texas gets shot. I think he gets shot in the back and the leg. And, we know what happened to JFK. But I'm watching this video and it's like completely like, I thought college kids did like a prank video or something. But I'm watching it and I go to all these other sites and the video's all the same. The Zapruder film is like all the same everywhere. And my head is hurting because I don't know what's going on. And in one of my Google searches, it said JFK assassination, Mandela effect. And that was another big clue, like what, Mandela effect again. So for me, that was one of my big awakening moments where, because I knew what I remembered, and it was not at all what I remembered.
You know what's interesting about that? I did see another version probably 3 years ago where there were 4 people in the car. And the thing that I saw was pointing out that the person in the passenger seat in the front of the car may have turned around and shot the president. And I'm like, first of all, where did that other person come from? And where is this story coming from? And some of the logistics of it looked like that seemed far more possible than the original story. And
Right.
so now what you're saying, it makes me curious. Do you think this is why the files are not being released, the full files?
I mean, that could be part of it. The other part of it too that's interesting to notice is about the whole concept of timelines. So when I talk to people about Mandela effects, the whole concept of time and timelines always come into it. And it feels like with the JFK type thing, this big historical event, like the timelines are merging and changing because literally almost every, I check on it almost every month, and there's always something new that I spot. Like literally, like that big sign blocking blah, 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 was never there before. Or who is this umbrella man? Or who is what is this Orville Nix film? Back in my old timeline, there was only one film, the Abraham Zapruder film. That was it. Now there's the Orville Nix film, and Orville Nix was filming on the other side where Zapruder was. So you can actually see Zapruder in the background filming. So you can see each other filming each other. And then that has another view of what happened. Then there's another film called the Marie Muchmore film. So there's at least 4 films that actually show what happened. So it's almost like we're getting more clarity about what happened. So it just keeps going on and on and on. So And it's about these timelines and how they're merging.
So you said you really like to look into the meaning of these Mandela effects. Like, what do they mean for us? And this seems like a poignant point in history, but at this point, it's a long way in our past. So what do you think it has to do with the timelines now? Is there a meaning that currently for it?
Yeah, I think that there is. And I think that part of the meaning has to do with, I call this, we've entered like a new era of light. So even the sun itself, like we're in a solar maximum right now, we're getting all kinds of solar flares, solar storms. As you know, just like hours ago, we were in a proton storm, all these protons coming in from the sun. So when so much light is hitting the planet, so to speak, things that have been kept in the shadows are no longer going to be hidden anymore. So to me, like all of these things are exposing the way, not just the way the reality works, but the way certain elements, certain factions have behaved. Like no one's going to be able to get out of this without, basically showing like what they actually did. It's like things that were kept in secret will no longer be able to be kept in secret.
So it's being revealed.
Yeah.
This is something I have in my notes I wanted to ask you about, is the solar flares.
Oh.
So, Mandela effect and timelines and even time travel have a place where they all sort of merge and become similar in the same thing and then diverse things at the same time. And my curiosity was about that everything we see about time travel, even in science fiction, you have to have a lot of energy to make that happen. There's a lot of electricity, a lot of energy. And now we've got these massive solar flares. Our Earth is just being really hit with a lot of extra energy, light, power, right? So I'm curious about whether or not you think that this is speeding up Mandela effects, creating this feeling of time travel more poignantly for people, where people are shifting timelines much, much faster. Do you think it plays a role?
Yeah, I think it does. And then whenever there's so much solar activity, I'm almost like, actually, I would say I'm looking for Mandela effects, but usually they find me. And what happens is like when you start noticing these Mandela effects, you just start observing your reality. You're a little bit more critical. Like you'll be able to spot things like, I don't think that was a certain way. Like, they could be personal things, whether it's in your neighborhood or whatever. So the energy from the sun itself, the solar flares, the radiation that's coming in, this cosmic radiation coming in from outside the solar system. There's a lot of forces that are at play that are doing things which the ultimate purpose is to wake us up, right? Yeah. It's to wake like this, what we see around us is basically an illusion. And what I say is that we're literally like lucid dreaming right now.
Yeah, I heard you mention in one of your other interviews the law of one, which is something that has always fascinated me. And in the law of one material, there is a lot of conversation about how this period of time specifically, how hot the energy would be, how intense it would be, and how many changes there would be. So when I first listened to it, it was back maybe in the 90s, the beginnings of that. I don't know, maybe the early 2000s. And now it seems like so poignant that things are shifting so rapidly. And the way people think is shifting so rapidly. And our reality is shifting incredibly. So I want to have Bill share this. So he lives in San Diego. And it's, pretty packed place. Lives in the Mission Beach area. And the houses that are there have been there. But what are you experiencing now, Bill? What's your reality doing?
Okay, well, first of all, the fact that we're even, talking about this in public, it sounds nuts, right? That like these things like Stouffer Stovetop stuffing, or many songs or movies, like one of my favorite ones is that movie where they build a baseball field out in the cornfield. If you build it, and then if you fill in the rest of that, if you build it, like Liz, what is your memory of if you build it?
They will come.
Okay. All right. Kind of makes sense with the movie if you've watched the movie. Is that your memory as well, Chris?
Yeah, I remember Kevin Costner. It was about like shoeless Joe, and like if you build it, he will come. So yeah,
Oh,
You remember it the other way.
you remember it the other way.
yeah, and that's the way these Mandela effects work too. Like sometimes it depends basically where you like what frequency you are vibrating at, because you move through the timelines basically how you're vibrating, and and what's happening too is a lot of people are getting dual memories because we're starting to become multidimensional, and we're starting to realize that we may have experienced both timelines or multiple timelines. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is so great because we have, we're all having a different memory of it. And you just said, Chris, Shoeless Joe. And to me, it's like, who the heck is Shoeless Joe? I've never heard of Shoeless Joe before. Shoeless Joe wasn't in the movie.
Right.
Yeah, it was about his dad and the team and the community would come, right?
You'd say, yeah, the other players will come.
Yeah.
That's who's going to come. The other players are literally going to come out of the cornfield. I don't know if in your version the other players came out of the cornfield.
They did. Yeah.
They would come out of the cornfield. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's so cool. And I love the way you described it because it was a different frequency you were on as your timeline you were on.
Yeah, because like I had the same, so I get all excited about these Mandela effects. So when I find out the one about the JFK assassination, I went to my father and I'm like, how many people were in the car? And he's like, there are 6 people in the car. I'm like, 6 people in the car? Who were they? And he names them all, including the governor of Texas and his wife. And I'm thinking to myself, who are you? Like, because I don't have that memory, but he experienced it a different way. So he experienced it on another timeline. So for him, it was always that way. But then the Bible ones got him because he was like big into the Bible. So some of those Bible ones like really shocked him.
I love that story. Before I tell mine, I think you should tell the story of the Bible one, and then I'm going to follow up with some local ones that were in my experience. But the blank and the lamb. What?
Hold on, Bill. We need to take our first break. We're already past our time for a break, so let's do that. Let's hear from our good sponsors. When we come back, we'll talk about Bible Mandela effects and then some you're experiencing locally. So for now, let's hear from our good sponsors, and we will be right back. Okay, and we're back. We're here with Chris Anatra, the quantum businessman, and also part of the IMEC team, talking about Mandela effects. Okay, so before the break, we were talking about what are the Bible Mandela effects? These are pretty interesting.
Yeah, so Bill gave us a good setup. Maybe Bill give that setup again.
Okay, so everybody who's listening, I'm not Bible-y, that's not a word probably, but I just made it up. But everybody knows, at least I would think everybody knows, and the blank lied down with the lamb. Everybody can fill that in for yourself. And
it's
I agree. Lion, right?
It's a lion. I grew up, by the way, I went to Catholic grammar school, Catholic high school, and 2 Catholic colleges. Never missed a mass until I was 21 years old. I got a lot of that fed to me from an early age. So this Mandela effect is like, that ain't that what is going on. Yeah. So tell us about your experience.
Yeah, so that was another one. So I was raised in a very religious household, read the Bible 5 times by the time I was a teenager. So was very much like in tune with what the scripture said. So I was excited. So I go to my parents and I'm like, do you remember in the book of Isaiah, what it says, who will lie down with the lamb? And of course, my father says the lion. My mother says the lion. I have him pull out a Bible and it says the wolf will reside with the lamb. My father's looking at the Bible and he's like, oh, I know what this is. This is the translation. I'm looking at a translation that says wolf. So he goes back into his bedroom. He pulls out like 5 other Bibles. He opens them all up to the book of Isaiah. Wolf, wolf. They all say wolf. And my mother's getting confused. Like, I don't understand. What does this mean? My father gets confused. He's not sure what's happening. And then like I hit him with another one, where Jesus said, how can I say this right? Where two or blank are gathered in my name. Have you heard that scripture
Two or
before?
more.
Two
Yeah.
or more,
Two
right?
or more gathered in my name.
It doesn't say that anymore. It says where two or three were gathered in my name.
No. You're just
Yeah. So my father's like, that doesn't even make any sense.
No,
Why two or three? Why limit?
It doesn't, because isn't that the lesson about that you need to gather together? Like, it's the reason you need to show up at church, because where you're gathered together, there's power, and Jesus shows up with you. The Spirit shows up with you. So two or three, I mean, that's interesting.
Just
that makes sense.
That just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
Oh my gosh.
But the problem is, so sometimes people will hear these things, they'll be aware of a Mandela effect, but then they just forget about it. Like, you go on with life, you got bills to pay, you got your job, you got your family, you've got, whatever. So sometimes a lot of people don't have time to like look into this further and further. But for me, it just was totally fascinating, because I had this thought that these are not just random. Like, I felt we were getting specific messages, from another, like a benefactor or from a higher power that was trying to like wake us up to, what the reality was. So yeah, so the Bible ones, the Cynthia Sue Larson, she's on the IMEC team, International Mandela Effect Conference. She talks a lot about the body changes, where like things in our physical bodies, like organs, are relocating to where people remember them. It affects geography of the planet. It reflects like art. For example, there's a famous painting called American Gothic. And American Gothic is like the farmer with his pitchfork, like looking straight ahead. And do you guys remember like who's standing next to him?
His wife.
No. And she had I remember she had like a bonnet on and stuff.
Yeah.
Now it's his daughter. It's the farmer and his daughter. And the daughter is like maybe 25, 28 years old. She's got blonde hair and blue eyes. And she's not looking forward anymore. She's kind of like looking off to the side, like, what did my father get me into, living on this farm? But what? Yeah, so I know. Yeah, so it just affects.
I vote no. The point was that there are these, they're kind of very droll, kind of like, they look like kind of hollow-eyed people, and it was an older woman. Like, the whole point is they look like, we've been here 1,000 years. Oh, wow, that's a crazy one. I've never heard that one. Have you heard this? That now there is a whole other Colosseum, much better tact than, much better shape than the Colosseum in Rome, the iconic Colosseum in Rome. There is a whole Colosseum in much better shape in Ethiopia, and it's what's being used for films. Have you heard this?
No, that's fascinating. I want to look into that.
Look it up. I mean, it is in much better shape. It looks very much like the original one, but it has just emerged that this always been a thing, except for that, of course, it's never been a thing, right? So the ancient stuff, let's talk a little bit more about that. You were talking about some of the geography, and some of this I know about, that Sicily is now much closer to Italy, that you had to go on a ferry to get there. That's true. And then Sardinia and Corsica were much smaller, and they look huge. Yeah. They look probably 1.5 times the size of Sicily now. Also, there's a new island near Malta that is, there were little ones, but now it looks much larger. So the Mediterranean now on maps seems to be much fuller of these islands than they ever were before. That's a weird one.
Yeah. So what's going on? Like, are we like, what's happening to our bodies? What's happening to the planet? Is something happening, or do we actually shift? Like quantum mechanics, there's different types of theories about the multiverse and so forth. Do we actually shift to like another version of Earth? That's just the continents are similar and islands are similar, but different. So, Yeah, that's all part of like understanding what's going on with these crazy Mandela effects.
A lot of people are noticing geographical changes. Here's one, and maybe either of you have heard of this. Have you heard of a region on the Earth that is now called the Oceania, that is called Oceania in the Oceania region?
That one got me. No, I have, and I discovered it probably maybe at least 4 years ago, and I'm like, Oceania. But yeah, that's I don't want to answer any more before Bill answers, but yeah.
I I have not. In the I'm like, okay, where's Oceania? I'm thinking it through the seven seas. I got the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Arctic, the Antarctic, the South Pacific, and let's see, the Caribbean, Mediterranean, yeah, or north of, yeah. Sorry, yeah. So I don't know. Where is Oceania? I'd like to know that.
Yeah, so Liz, where's
The
Oceania?
Indian Ocean,
No,
You think?
no, actually, it is an area that what I can gather, it's above Australia where you start to get into the Pacific Islands, above the Indian Ocean, above where the Pacific Ocean starts to be, and a lot of those Pacific islands, including like Easter Island and that kind of area. So actually, to be honest, I couldn't quite gather what are the boundaries of it. It seems like a huge area that is now being referred to as Oceania. I'm like, well, where have I been? Is that always been a thing? And I just didn't know. But I asked around to people, I'm like, do you know where Oceania is? And they're like, no, is that on another planet?
Yeah. So yeah, and as a matter of fact, like it goes around like Australia. You know what's really weird too about Oceania? You know that series Lost that was
Yeah.
popular like 20 years ago with the island? The name of the airline that crashes is Oceana Airlines,
Oh,
which is
weird.
which is really weird because I thought it was a different airline name, but now when I looked it up, I'm like Oceana Airlines, like wow. And then just all kinds of weird things. Like there's in the North Atlantic Ocean, there's a sea called the Sargasso Sea, which is full of seaweed. That's literally, there's a sea in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean called the Sargasso Sea. And the story is when Christopher Columbus and the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria were coming across, they got tangled up in the seaweed on the way over, and they thought their boats were going to run aground because where there's so much seaweed, that usually means there's going to be land there. So there's a whole story, like history's changed where, they thought the boats were going to, get get grounded from the seaweed and all that. I never heard those stories before. So yeah, so seas with
Neither.
oceans and yeah.
Weird. You know, when you experience one of these, there's a feeling that goes along with it. For me, it always felt like maybe I was losing my own mind, which, many people may agree with that. But I had this experience in 2016. We would take groups of people to Italy on language trips, language tours. And my family's from Sicily, so we spent a lot of time in Sicily.
You're from Sicily too. Okay.
Yeah, from the
Cool.
town of Enna. Enna and Terracini are where
Nice.
my family are from. And many of them still live there. So we would go to the town of Cefalù. Are you familiar with Cefalù?
I'm not.
It's in the north east of Sicily. It's a very, very popular tourist place, very beautiful, very kind of pirate sea looking, from the seaside. And inside, the town is kind of built around a fortress, or at least it was. So again, I've spent a lot of time there. 2016, we took this group. I'm the driver of the van. We've got 10 women in a van together on this tour. And we get to the entrance of the town to come in, and the town doesn't look anything like I recall, not anything. And we're trying to get to a kind of an oceanfront hotel, and there's a policeman there, and there's three of us in the car that speak Italian, two women, that's their native language, a little different dialect, one from Venice, one from Bari. And so, they're talking to this man and he's using a little Sicilian dialect. But the confusion about how to get to the place that we needed to go, it was almost like he didn't know either. And obviously, he'd lived there his whole life. And I thought, okay, there's going to be a point in this trip where this town looks familiar to me again. And it never did, except for one street was like, okay, I'm in the Cefalù that I know. But it was so different. And the feeling of it that went with it, of, did I shift timelines? Am I losing it? Or is this a different place than I knew? And it really felt so different. And these towns for me, because I've spent a lot of time, they have a real feeling for me. They're so close to my heart that this felt really strange. And it didn't feel great, to be honest, because I just could not feel that town the way I was used to. It was so strange. So do you find that people have a real visceral experience with this?
Yeah, usually it starts with confusion and self-doubt because there must be something wrong with me. I must be misremembering something the wrong way, because you look around and you see what it is and it doesn't compare with what your memory has. But if you just consider that Sicily itself has grown enormous, it always used to be like Italy was the boot kicking Sicily. Now it's like Sicily's like stuck to Italy, and the whole boot shape doesn't look like a boot anymore. It looks kind of like weird. So you're literally on a different Sicily. And there's a whole, like, World War II has different history. Like the Nazis had this big presence in Sicily, and there were all these battles there. And I'm like, I don't remember any of that stuff, like learning about World War II history. I didn't realize that. So yeah, we're literally like having a different experience.
Yeah, so Bill, you were going to share about your local stuff, and I asked you, tell about the houses that you're experiencing on your walk, like very, very close to your home.
Oh yeah, well, shocking. The houses are very close together here. They sell the land by the square inch. So it's all packed in. Like crazy, and walking along, all of a sudden there'll be a house where I counted it up. And I call Liz, I'm like, hey, Liz, it's just things are extremely unstable. I counted, and I'll walk every few days. So I counted something like 3 new houses. And when I say new, I mean new to me in my world. Like, these are oceanfront houses. So you really look at every house as you go by, because you're like, oh, well, I wonder what they got going on there, and years. And then these are obviously, as you look at them, they're not new construction. They've been there forever. And I saw 3 on my last walk. And also I looked over, and the lifeguard towers are always like a yellow or orangish color. And all of a sudden it was white. And we're talking the end of the season. They didn't repaint them or anything. It's just now white. And the paint is older, on it. So anyway, it's very strange to experience it, because you're like, am I losing my mind? What is wrong with me? But, obviously we've gotten more accustomed to it now. And so, the question for you, Chris, is from your perspective, from my perspective, the conversation with Liz goes something like, hey, things are extremely unstable. That means they're extremely malleable. So things are very malleable to our thoughts and feelings right now. Reality is bending very easily. But tell us your perspective about this.
Yes, so one of the things I say is that Mandela effects are like Easter eggs in a video game. They are hints and wonderful surprises that we have experienced a timeline shift. So when these things happen, especially like what you're describing, the personal Mandela effects, those could have even more impact than like the big ones, like geography or art or whatever it is. So it's actually showing that you are vibrating at a faster pace, at a higher frequency, and you've shifted into another timeline where they never painted those towers, the yellow and the orange. They were always white. And I experienced the same thing in my neighborhood, and signs and signage and so forth. And I'll go and I'll check the sign. Like, was that sign just installed there? And I'll get out of my car and I'll check it. And there'll be like bubble gum stuck to it. And like it's all dirty on a certain, like it's been there for a long time, but it'd be on a road that I would go by all the time. And like that sign was never there before. So yeah, so the house colors change. I'm like, did they just paint their house overnight? Like that's because when I left, I got home from work yesterday, it was a certain color and now it's another color. So yeah, so these type of things happen just to show us that we've made a shift, and it's all positive.
All right, so we are up against our next break. Let's hear from our good sponsors. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about, the fact that Bill and I and the people who do Cognomovement, we're constantly shifting timelines because we're constantly shifting the way our body uses energy and how we interact with the field. But also there's a thing, Chris, that you call the Earth game that we really want to know about. So let's hear from our good sponsors and we will be right back. And we're back. We're here with Chris Anatra and we're talking about the Mandela effect. And it's so funny because you're talking about raising your frequency. And this is something that in the work of Cognomovement that Bill and I do, we are literally changing the way the body is moving electricity along the power lines of the nervous system. And one of the things that started to happen immediately was that timeline started to shift in the craziest way. Bill, really one of the earliest stories was Bill talking about driving with his wife, and there was a whole car dealership missing. Do you want to tell that story real quick, Bill? Remember about the 7-Eleven and the car dealership?
Yeah, 30 years, 30 years living in the same neighborhood. You get on the freeway, the same entrance on the freeway for 30 years. And one day, as I'm stopped at the stoplight, and I look over kitty corner, and I see a 7-Eleven, and it freaked me out because I'm like, I asked my wife, hey, how long's that 7-Eleven been there? And I'm looking at it, the signs are kind of faded, and and she says, it's been there the entire time, the entire time, decades. And I was like, if you would have given me $1 million and said, I'm going to bet you what's on that corner, I would have said $1 million that it's a Mossy Nissan and car dealer. I'm 100% confident, and anyway, there you go. It's not, but it's just ridiculous when these shifts happen. Just like Stouffer Stovetop or one of the other, some of these songs or movies that
yeah. Well, some of these seem kind of disturbing, but once we realized that it was a natural accident side effect of what we were doing, we realized, changing our consciousness very, very rapidly, changing the way the electricity in our body runs, changing the perspective through which we see the world, like the actual perspective, and then the world changed around us. We call it like a quantum relationship effect that happened. We change ourselves and the people around us look completely different. I mean, talk about a whiplash Mandela effect. So actually, for everyone listening to this, Bill and I are going to be at the International Mandela Effect Conference. Woo! It is happening November the 7th through the 11th, 10th.
Yes, so on November 7th in the evening, there's a little welcome reception. And then the conference is the 8th, 9th, and 10th.
Yeah. And so we've been asked to speak at the event, but also to put on a little class for you guys. And if you show up at that International Mandela Effect and come to our workshop, we are going to actually show you, and you'll have an experience of changing your nervous system in order to change your reality. And when you know how to do this, you can create some of the coolest things in your life, things wanted. It's like manifestation on steroids, but it's exactly what you're talking about, is changing the frequency in the body, the actual power lines, how the brain and the body talk to each other, and then how the body talks to the rest of the electromagnetic field around us. So that is a cool thing to look forward to. But you told us something, Chris. You said that there's something called the Earth Game. Tell us about this.
Yeah. So I just want to say that I'm very excited to hear you and Bill talk, at the conference. And you, with Cognomovement, you've tapped into something. You've definitely tapped into something very special. And then you can see it becomes obvious because you see how the timelines are changing, right before your eyes. So, and on November 8th, I believe that's when you guys are giving your presentation. I think it's later on in the morning. And then I think I'm doing mine as well in the afternoon on November 8th. And the topic of mine is called the Earth Game. So what is that? What do I mean by the Earth Game? Is this whole experience a type of game? And that's pretty much what my presentation is about. It's about what this place is, what this reality is, how it was created, what the purpose of it was. And then Earth is so special. It's called the jewel of the universe because we can experience density. Some people call it hard light technology or solid light technology. It's the concept that we're in a holographic type universe and everything is constructed of light. And we can experience the five senses. We can experience emotions. We can experience the polarity of duality. There are all these things where on another level, we don't have those things. We can't eat a pizza and taste what the pizza tastes like. You come to Earth and wow, you can start to enjoy food and you can have this experience and that experience. So it's also made this a place where a lot of beings want to own this place for themselves. So that led to conflicts, and there's things called timeline wars and all fighting over, who's going to have dominance of Earth. And then how that whole concept became a game for those that wanted to come in and help and wake people up, so to speak, and help them understand how the reality works so that they can participate and actually have abundance in their life and have all of these things that so many of us are missing because, we're in a debt-based slavery type system and blah, 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 blah. So I talk about that whole concept about it being a game and how that works and how to take advantage of it, how to have your best life from that. So I'm excited to share all these things. And it's going to be far out. I'm going to be talking about some really interesting things that I don't know if anyone's ever spoken about them before, but it's going to be definitely a very interesting presentation.
Man, that sounds cool, doesn't it? Bill will be the audience for that for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that time with you then.
Actually, I was thinking about putting together a presentation. I think this is going to be cool because we can talk about the weird stuff that we talk about when we're not, on camera. Bill and I have the weirdest conversations, about all this stuff. And I feel like at this event, there's going to be the like-minded people who not only want to hear about it, but can actually get it.
Yeah. And sometimes I call it the IMEC conference, but I call it a little time traveler convention, because I've been noticing at the other conferences that we have, a lot of the people that attend, they don't even realize it, but they're time travelers. And there's so people like myself can see a residue of time travel. So I'm like, oh, and it's funny how a lot of like-minded people get together. And then there's another concept called higher self trading. So if you're in a game environment and you're playing against other players, there's this whole concept where you could trade different blueprints for different types of abilities. For example, if one player has something that you need, you can trade them for it. You're not giving anything away. You're just kind of trading blueprints back and forth. So a lot of times our higher selves will do that. In fact, our higher selves might be doing that right now. They're negotiating oh, Liz has a really good technology for blah, blah, blah. I'd really like to have that. And there might be something that I have that Bill wants. So it's like this thing that goes on behind the scenes. So you've got the time travel element, you've got, higher self trading that's going on. You've got like-minded people that are getting together. It's also a great way to meet soul family, because soul family kind of gets attracted to the same type of things. So if anyone that's listening to this kind of feels a pull to want to go, like listen to that, because that could be like your higher self saying, hey, this is some place that you may want to go to, because you'll leave it. And then when you get home, I can almost guarantee you'll see more Mandela effects. Those lifeguard chairs might have changed back to yellow and orange, or whatever it is. And I always find that happens to me as well. If I go away someplace and I do something that's high frequency and I come back, my whole area, like I spot all these things that were never there before. So it's going to be a great conference.
I think it's going to be amazing. Go ahead, Bill. We got about 1 minute.
We only got 1 minute. Oh, see, damn, we ran out of time. There's so many interesting things. Here's one of the things that I noticed about watching your other interviews and regarding all of this is that we have information when we get together to that missing components that you have that we don't have, and vice versa. So we're very much looking forward to sharing the different pieces of the puzzle, and with that being able to utilize, how can we utilize this Mandela effect to elevate ourselves, to enrich our lives. And that's really one of the key points out of this conference. That's a great takeaway.
So we really have come up against a hard stop. So let's do this. We will extend the episode out. If you guys want to hear, we'll talk a little bit more about time travel. We'll take another 10 minutes. But for now, anybody listening to us in the UK Health Radio Network world, if you want to come to this event, and I highly encourage you to, Nashville, Tennessee, November 7th through the 10th, and you're going to go to imec.world. And if you want to know more about Chris, go to Quantum Businessman on YouTube. So for now, that's the end of the segment. We'll see you for the rest on YouTube. Until next week, be safe and be well. Okay, everybody. So this is our extended conversation with Chris Anatra, the quantum businessman. And there's just so much to talk about that we just couldn't contain it in our 44-minute UK Health Radio show. So everybody here on YouTube get a chance to actually have a little bit more of Chris, which we all want, right? Okay, so there was something you talked about, Chris, and it was about the Star Wars Mandela effect. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's actually quite a few Mandela effects in the original Star Wars movie. So if you're like a Star Wars nerd, these Mandela effects like jump right out at you. The one I'm going to mention is the famous one. This was in The Empire Strikes Back, where Darth Vader says to Luke Skywalker, I always remember him saying, Luke, I am your father. And as a teenager, I used to have this poster in my bedroom that said, Luke, I am your father. I mean, it was imprinted, into my memory very clearly. And then there was a Mandela effect where that changed, where Darth Vader now says, no, I am your father. And people are like, he didn't say no. He said, Luke, I'm your father. And then one of the things I like to do is I like to tune in to the hidden meaning of Mandela effects. And that one had a really interesting hidden meaning. And what I tuned into was, first off, the word no, like N-O. It could also be K-N-O-W. Know I'm your father, or know or comprehend I'm your father. So that was one part of it too, because a lot of the English language is spellcasting. You're actually saying words that have a meaning that you're not intending. So if you say like good morning to someone, well, what do you do at a funeral? You mourn, you weep. So you're telling someone, have a good day of mourning and weeping. It's not what you mean to say, but that's the dualness of the language that we use. So could it be K-N-O-W, I am your father? But then take that to another level. Who said it? Darth Vader. What was Darth Vader's name in Star Wars? Anakin Skywalker. Anakin is the Germanic name for the Anu, which is related to a race called the Anunnaki. I don't know if you guys have heard of like talking about ET alien species. There's a species called the Anunnaki, which are said to be the fathers of our DNA genetic code. So is it possible that Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, and by the way, the Anunnaki were known as the gods that walked in the sky. They were called the Skywalkers. So you add that into it and you go even further. So was Darth Vader trying to convey, or was the Anunnaki trying to convey that they are the fathers of our genetic code? And of course, when Luke Skywalker hears it, he's like, no, no, no. And he jumps off the platform and all that. So yeah, so when you start going deep into some of these Mandela effects, their meanings start to be revealed, that it's not just random, where you take one word now and who said it, and then you can start to put a puzzle piece together as to what was actually trying to be conveyed. So that's one of the cool things when you start looking into going into more details with these.
That is so cool. So cool. And I hadn't even, it hadn't occurred to me. I'd heard the connection between not Luke Skywalker, but Anakin and the Anunnaki before, but that is very cool. Do you know the thing about the morning, in German it's Guten Morgen, right? And there in the Celtic pantheon, the Morrigan is the person who brings you to the underworld, the god of taking you from earth to the underworld. And so I listened to this whole series of books that, that had to do with the pantheons of gods. And I thought about that Morrigan, good morning, Guten Morgen. Are you actually inviting people into the underworld? And I know that was a weird thought. And until you said the thing about the Luke Skywalker, I didn't realize there were other people that had those weird thoughts.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's like littered throughout our language and so forth. You start looking at things and it's like, wow, I didn't realize that, and you start making all these connections.
Yeah, so interesting. And then you have the whole Morning Star, that whole issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Who is it that is there's a whole series called The Shadow Hunters that's about that, about the Morning Star. That's their last name is Morgenstern. So yeah, interesting. Anyway, let's talk about the segue of Mandela effect and time travel. We have a lot of time travel stories, don't we, Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah. But what I loved is I'd specifically like to hear about specifically time travel. And you had said in one of your other interviews about I think there were three different ways of creating Mandela effects and time travel. Maybe you could explain that to our audience.
Yeah. So there's different reasons, there's different things that can cause Mandela effects. And what I've tuned into is maybe about 5% of them are caused by like a time travel type event. So time travel does play a role. A lot of people are like, time travel doesn't exist, blah, blah, blah. Well, how do you know in the ancient past, there were many, many civilizations before what we know of, they didn't figure it out, or Atlantis didn't figure it out, or some future civilization didn't figure it out and then brought it backwards in time to where they needed it. So the whole concept for me, if you look at it logically, you begin to understand that if we're having an experience that's based in linear time, I say that we see the world around us at 60 frames per second, then it starts to make sense that if you know how to deal with time, you can actually change your X, Y, and Z coordinates within time and space. So X and Y is your physical location, and Z is where you are in time. And if you can change that and you know how that works, I think that time travel is possible. And some of these Mandela effects are caused by time travel. Like the one you talk about, Liz, the cornucopia, the missing cornucopia on Fruit of the Loom. Like when I track that one back, that is a time based upon time travel. And I'll just say real quick, what I've tuned into with that. But the other place there's a cornucopia is with Thanksgiving. right? So Thanksgiving holidays, you see like the cornucopia and, the Horn of Plenty and all the fruits and stuff coming out of it. So that's tied into like Thanksgiving treaties with the native peoples when the pilgrims arrived and so forth. So tuning into that, I just want to say, is it possible, perhaps the United States military or some other organization like that figured out they could become stronger if treaties were broken with the native peoples? And so, and I've made some videos where I've talked about this before. So is it possible that when these treaties were being broken, it was helping the US military or whatever become stronger, but it caused like a butterfly effect where it also removed the cornucopia off of your underwear? So yeah, so exactly.
Oh,
So is it possible that time travel events did certain types of things that actually will have a reverberation that causes a Mandela effect? So that's one of like a few examples that when I look into are caused by time travel.
yeah, that one is such a weird one because it seems like, the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, the basket of plenty, it's about abundance. It's about we have so much produce, we have so much abundance. And a fruit on a plate, it just doesn't quite convey the same thing. Fruit on a plate is more like, here's what we have available in the house to eat. Like it doesn't convey the same message. And so I have always thought that was so strange that that would be removed because the meaning is removed if you remove the basket, the cornucopia part of it. Very odd. Yeah, that would be an interesting one to know for sure what would be the meaning, or if there really even is one, if it's just a completely different timeline.
Yeah, and then some timelines get weird. Like I call these hairballs of timelines. Like when the Titanic sank, that was a hairball of timelines because there were all these different factions trying to make sure that it sank, trying to make sure that it didn't sink. There were no survivors. And then there's remnants of newspaper articles that you can find where it says that everyone is safe. It's being, towed back into Newfoundland or whatever it is. So you could see the evidence that of certain timelines, but the timeline that's manifest is the one that we all know about, where it hit the iceberg and it went down. So yeah, the hairballs is all kinds of time travel conflicts that go back and forth. Time travel is it's a thing. It's a big thing.
Yeah, it's a big thing. And there's positive things that come out of it. Our whole work, maybe a part of a reason that this whole work exists is these time shifts that they have to shift to become available. So there's things in our work that are now possible to do that were not possible on the planet 5 years ago. I always use the word available. The fact that things are shifting so quickly has allowed us access to the nervous system to make changes that just should not be possible. And yet they're completely repeatable. And it's like they've become available on the planet. And then once that's available, the next thing becomes available. And Bill and I know it has a lot to do with changing the consciousness level, like you talked about. So this intentional shifting the timeline. But where the hairball part comes in, a lot of things we do by accident. So we created this event called Cogno-Conscious, where you move 17 layers of emotions. Originally, we were doing in 2 days. It made no sense. It was nuts. But you're clearing from shame to enlightenment. And so your circuitry is changing, and these nervous system injuries are being deleted, and then more energy is restored to the body, and your voltage goes up, which we can measure. So we're doing this crazy thing. The first time we did it, Bill and I were just facilitating, right? Participating, but facilitating. So I live in Southern Oregon. Bill lives in San Diego. And my daughter and I had driven down. So we're driving home. And I mean, after that event, the world just looked weird. It just looked different. We didn't have the vernacular yet. We didn't have the language to even describe what was going on. Everything looked different. So strange. The light looked different. The roads looked different. We get to about the cutoff. It's on the I-5, on the coast of the Pacific coast. We get to the cutoff where you go straight to continue up I-5. into Northern California, or you make a turn onto to go to Southern or to San Francisco, or you go straight to go to San Francisco and you turn to go to the I-5. So we're there. I had driven this every week for 4 years. 4 years. I know the road, right? I've done it. We're driving. I'm talking to my husband, and there's a town right before this turnoff called Patterson and Wesley. And I'm talking to him, and I said, wow, Patterson has really grown. It had been a year since I'd seen it. Patterson has really grown. There's so many houses here. The next thing I know, we're in Berkeley, California. Like a snap of a finger, we're in Berkeley. My daughter had strangely climbed in the back seat on top of the suitcases and was sleeping. It was really weird. And now my husband is asking me, have you passed Patterson and Wesley? Well, I'm irritated. I'm like, I just told you about Patterson. He said, no, you didn't. And all of a sudden it occurs to me, I'm seeing signs for Berkeley, and we're probably hours off track because of traffic in Berkeley at that time. And the hairball part, it took us 6 hours to get back to the freeway.
Oh my God.
And nothing looked right. Nothing seemed right. Get back on the freeway, and traffic is moving. It would be a car maybe 5 miles out that you can see the headlights, because now it's dark. And in a second, it's on you. It's right there, like shifting. Like, it was crazy. And I called Bill. I'm like, oh my God, something happened. And it was the first time we realized that how powerful changing your own circuitry can create time anomalies and these hairballs in your own life. Now we know, and we're much more careful, but it's extraordinarily powerful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just like, as you're telling, I want to say too, like when you first started speaking, I got a big deja vu. So like the things you were saying, like what I finished up saying and then what you were saying, I'm like, oh my God, we've had this conversation before.
Oh, wow.
And that's going to be another thing too. I think besides Mandela effects, I think the whole deja vu type thing is going to start coming up more and more for people, like a glitch in the matrix, where you're remembering another. I call them time loops. You're remembering another time loop, or I call it also the dress rehearsal. And the dress rehearsal is when in the presentations that I give, I talk about that this is the final time loop. And we could have lived this life like a Groundhog Day, our lives, hundreds of times. And our higher self keep kind of pushing us in different directions to see what works, what doesn't work. Now we're in the final loop. And so all the dress rehearsals are over, but we can still sometimes pick up on those deja vu glitches in the matrix where we remember something that happened before. So, yeah, and just talking about the whole highway thing too, it's almost like you guys were like racing through timelines, like things are getting really weird for you. Seems like we have a book and like all the pages of the book, like you were like flipping through timelines really fast. That's why it took like all those extra hours to find your way and so forth.
Yeah, we've been over it and over it and over it, trying to figure out the time frame. I talked to Cynthia about it because she lives in that area. I'm like, how long does it take to get from the I-5 cutoff to Berkeley in traffic? The minimum of about 45 minutes if you were really driving fast and there was no traffic. It had to have been hours. And it was broad daylight, and by the time we got there, it was starting to get dark. And where were we? We've no idea.
Yeah.
But it taught us a big lesson about how strong these changes can be and how much your physical body can create the change. We use it for good things like bending time, right, Bill? Bill has a good bending time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, once you start to learn, how to bend time, it becomes really simple. The few of these principles of moving in between dimensions, and I think one of the things that really keeps us trapped in a particular timeline is fear. And the closer we can get to love and gratitude, the more time becomes malleable. And we've used it. We had I think the very first experience, I've talked about it in the past. For me, I did a trip that every week, on Saturdays, I would leave my house at, I think it was something like 8:15 or something like that. And I would arrive in Riverside at the destination at exactly 10 o'clock, and 70 miles an hour on the cruise control. And, had a lemony snicket's morning, every possible thing that could go wrong. Wife can't get her out of the house. Oh, we got to go back in the house. Now we're out of gas. We got to make sure we fill up the tank with gas. And, every possible thing, put me, I don't know, something half an hour, 40 minutes late. And I was on the freeway, and somehow, some way, I knew this concept of the dimensions, and that the third dimension had linear time, which was, 60 seconds in a minute, and 60 minutes in an hour. And that was my life. You want to get there sooner, press on the gas. That's about how it worked.
Right.
And then the concept of the other dimension that I had intellectually understood, which was that this other dimension, the fourth dimension, is basically you go from the third dimension, which is conditional love, to fourth dimension, unconditional love. And I was like, well, one of the derivatives of love is gratitude. And I just started becoming grateful for everything. And I said, well, if I can enter this dimension, time should be malleable. So I'm going to be grateful for everything. And I'll set the time that I'm supposed to get there, like, even earlier, 10 minutes to 10. And I put on the cruise control, and I became grateful for my daughter's beating heart in the back, and my wife's digestion, and the people in the cars next to me, and they're all their circulation's working, and they're feeling good, and the little bumps on the freeway, those keep me on from driving off, and I'm just grateful for any darn thing that I'm authentically grateful for. And anyway, just didn't pay any attention to time, just gratitude the whole way. And lo and behold, I hit the blinker switch and pulling into the driveway. And sure enough, 10 minutes to 10 is not mathematically possible. And anyway, the thing about it is, myself and Liz, use this now to, basically, like a formula that you can use to start getting yourself there on time, for things that you couldn't before.
That's cool.
Speaking of time, we're running out of time with Chris, but there's one last thing, Chris, and I think we could, I think this would be a good segment that I could cut out, and we could even use as a promo for the event.
Okay.
And it's a place where our work kind of intersects. So tell us about how teeth are time crystals.
Oh, teeth are time crystals. Yeah, exactly. And that all came to me with the Mandela effect from a James Bond movie. And the James Bond movie had this character named Jaws, and he had like these big like braces on his teeth, and he would like bite things, and he was like a really tall guy. He falls in love with this girl named Dolly. And I always remember in the James Bond film, they fall in love, and the braces, because Dolly had braces too. So their braces was like something that kind of like gave them that empathy for each other and made them start to like each other more. And then a Mandela effect is that Dolly never had braces. She's got really good, straight, white teeth. So a lot of people are like, no, I remember Dolly had braces just like Jaws did. And then that goes into the whole concept of how teeth are literally time crystals. Every time you eat something, goes over your teeth, it's recorded. And actually in your voice box, there's something called a hyoid. And that also is tracking everything you've ever said, every song you've ever sung, anything you've ever said is stored in the hyoid in the throat area. So you've got these parts of your body that are really important, that are really magical. So your teeth actually have a record of time, and people that are time travelers sometimes have problems with their teeth. They have all these kinds of crazy teeth problems because they're jumping all around into time, different timelines and eras and whatever it is. So yeah, that's a very fascinating thing about the teeth and how they're time crystals.
Well, Bill, how does that relate to something we do?
Well, funny. That's really funny because, we figured out that you can actually access those memories. One of the things that we utilize is the teeth. And if
Really?
you touch your teeth, touch your tip of your tongue to your tooth, it's each tooth literally is like switching channels on a TV. And there is a Cognomovement technique where you actually get to see and be there. You're literally there. Let's say, for me, I was on my tricycle, a certain tooth. When we did the technique, I'm on my tricycle. I can feel the sun on my back. I can feel my feet on the wheels. I'm there. I'm going down my sidewalk and I'm digging it, but it's visceral, as if you're physically there. So you're actually onto something, and we have the other part of the technology for experiencing that. And anyway.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's
it's connecting to the neural pattern through that tooth. And it literally is like traveling through time and witnessing an event all over again.
yeah. So that as you're saying that too, I'm remembering from, the whole concept of like Dolly not having braces anymore and her teeth are really nice. Could that be a sign that our timelines are improving? Like the timelines aren't as crooked and crazy as they were before. So yeah.
Yeah, this has the effect of once the person fully witnesses, so it's an eye position combined with the tooth. And then, we move all of that to create change. So once the person experiences, like in Bill's situation, that was connected to a certain point in time, which was causing a problem in his neural pattern, in his electrical system, and in his life. So we actually rewrite the story in that place, and then life changes around the person just dramatically. So it rewrites, but it changes the timeline entirely. It changes the whole perspective of it as well. So, but I had never heard that till I heard you say it, that teeth are these time crystals, really almost a time capsule.
Yeah, that's really fast. Yeah, you guys have tapped into something like really special. And before Cynthia Sue Larson introduced me, I never heard of you guys before. So I'm glad that I've heard of you and can really experience your work firsthand in Nashville.
Yeah, we are going to have so much fun, don't you think, Bill?
Yes. And gosh, there's so much more. I wanted to talk to you about plasma and it showing up in time travel. Can we just take a couple more minutes, Liz? We just want to hear this.
Yes.
Go for it.
Yeah. So you're probably referring to, there have been like different secret projects involving time travel. And some of them, like in the 70s and 80s, involved plasma. And it involved the scientific method where these scientists built this device that was about half the size of a tennis court. And you would walk into it and there'd be plasma, and you'd walk into this plasma ball, so to speak, and then you'd feel your body drop. And then depending on how it was programmed, you would drop into another timeline, into another time period. And in some of these secret projects, they found that it worked really well with kids. Like children were more accessible to be able to go into these other timelines. So a lot of times children would be used to go and observe different timelines. They'd come back and they would report what they've heard. But it all has to do with with plasma technology and what really is plasma, right? So the sun is ejecting plasma when we have the solar flares. We're getting protons, we're getting all this plasma energy coming to us. And plasma is something that's very, very important for understanding how the reality works. And I think as time goes on, we're going to see even more and more how special plasma is.
And it's interesting that they call an aspect of our blood plasma as well.
Blood plasma, right?
Yeah, like there must be some connection there too.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the Hindenburg and the plasma above the Hindenburg. Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. So I love talking about. See, the Hindenburg was really cool because the Hindenburg was a flying 5-star hotel. Like people love the Hindenburg, and a lot of people don't realize it actually made hundreds and hundreds of trips before it crashed in New Jersey. It would go from Berlin to South America. People loved the experience. It was quiet. There was a cigar bar, a piano bar. It was like really good food that you would eat. So you'd enjoy the whole 3 or 4 day trip to go from Berlin, to South America. So what happened with the Hindenburg, and this actually goes and also gets into the world of time travel, but time travelers saw that they looked at all these different timelines. Let's say you're looking at 10,000 different timelines. There's a certain number of timelines where Germany lost the war. And in every one of those timelines, the Hindenburg went down because people loved that. Like people loved Germany, like even the United States, like it wasn't like it is, like the Nazis, blah, blah, blah. People had a whole different like relationship to that. So when the Hindenburg went down, that kind of changed things. So the whole concept is what caused the Hindenburg to go down. What they say is that in that field in New Jersey, when it went down, there was a phenomena called St. Elmo's fire. And St. Elmo's fire is a type of plasma, and it's also involved, it's a signature frequency that has to do with time travel. So is it possible that the whatever time travel faction caused the St. Elmo's fire, which caused the Hindenburg to go down? But the good part about it was that I remember when the Hindenburg went down, everybody died. Like it was the humanity. It was like it was a horrible thing. Nobody wanted to go on airships anymore. Like that whole industry completely changed. And we went to, jet aircraft that took over the world. But now in this timeline, I think that there were like around 100, I forget the numbers, but there were like around 100 people that were on board. Now, like almost 80 of them survive. So we're also in another timeline where the time travel events or the time travelers, or however you want to put it, helped us edit in a timeline where there was the fewest loss of life as well. So, and then plasma and St. Elmo's fire played a part of that. And part of that also had to do with, there are these stories about ship captains back in the day, like hundreds of years ago, if they were trying to escape, like let's say you're a pirate ship and you're trying to escape, you would have somebody on board that could control the weather, and they would call in St. Elmo's fire. It would hit the masts of the ship, and the ship would actually move through time. It can move to another part of the ocean. It can move to another time period. You basically escape those that were trying to track you down. So yeah, the whole St. Elmo's fire plasma thing also is a really unique tie-in and how that's related to the Hindenburg.
That's so interesting. When I heard you talk about that in another interview, and I was thinking, I wonder if that is a phenomenon of ghost ships, where people will see some of these pirate ships that are, from the 1700s, 1400s, that show up on the ocean.
That could be. That's a good point.
You're just seeing it in an aspect of time, and maybe it's there, maybe it's really not. So fascinating.
It is.
Oh my gosh, we could talk to you all day, Chris, but we know we need to let you go. We have to get back to work as well. So I just want to say, for us at the Cognomovement team and New Life Perspectives UK Health Radio Show, thank you so much for being here. This has been a lot of fun.
It's been a lot of fun. Nice to hang out with you and Bill again, for sure. And looking forward to our times in Nashville.
Yeah, us too.
Thank you, Chris.
So everybody, if you want to join us in Nashville again, please go to imec.world and get your tickets for the International Mandela Effect if you want to know a lot more about these subjects, and I'm sure a whole lot of other things we didn't even touch on. Please join us. It is November 7th through the 10th, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun in Nashville, Tennessee. Thanks again, Chris. Thanks, Bill. And until next time, everyone, be safe and be well.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.